The kidnapping of Nancy Guthrie and the chilling, enigmatic ransom notes associated with it have fractured the peace of our collective reality, transforming into one of the most baffling, haunting, and deeply unsettling criminal mysteries of modern history. When investigators, true crime experts, and former law enforcement officials first began examining the timeline and the bloodstained material evidence left behind on that desolate front porch, a terrifying truth became instantly apparent. This was never a routine abduction. Every single sentence, every calculated stylistic choice, and every deliberate, bone-chilling omission hidden within those ransom messages serves as a psychological fingerprint, offering a dark, claustrophobic glimpse into the mind of a predatory lone offender. As the federal investigation plunged deeper into the abyss, veteran criminal profilers began whispering a hazardous, forbidden name behind closed doors: Tommaso Cioni. In the shadowy, smoke-filled corridors of behavioral profiling, Cioni represents a rare and terrifying psychological archetype, an elusive shadow dweller obsessed with intellectual superiority, clinical staging, and the absolute manipulation of public media. Investigators poring over encrypted digital footprints and jagged behavioral markers started to suspect with mounting dread that the hand guiding these theatrical, taunting notes belonged to someone cut from that exact cloth, a cunning, ice-blooded mastermind operating in total darkness, orchestrating every single word to mentally torture law enforcement and crush a grieving family. When the first note materialized in the public sphere, its opening line was unsettlingly unnatural, dripping with a quiet, calculated menace. "Hello, Savannah. We have your mother Nancy." This phrase was far from the direct, harsh, and uncompromising demand typically found in a standard extortion note. Usually, when a cold-hearted predator or criminal syndicate abducts someone for financial leverage, their tone is blunt, concise, and stripped of unnecessary pleasantries, operating along the chilling lines of a clinical formula. "We have your loved one. Pay this specific amount, and do not involve the law or face immediate consequences." However, the choice to explicitly name the victim and use a personalized, almost conversational greeting like "Hello, Savannah," coupled with redundant information, "We have your mother Nancy," was a deliberate psychological weapon. Since Savannah Guthrie already knew full well that Nancy was her mother, coupling the word mother with the proper noun Nancy was a glaring example of superfluous, artificial language designed to project a false, suffocating sense of intimacy and total omniscience. It was a message written not just to communicate, but to utterly paralyze. The financial demands outlined in the first part of that initial note were equally staggering, chaotic, and erratic, adding another layer of psychological terror. Demanding $4 million to be designated strictly for payment in untraceable cryptocurrency, with an aggressively strict deadline of 5 p.m. on February 5th, only to arbitrarily escalate the demand to a staggering $6 million and violently compress the final deadline to February 9th, created severe, jarring internal contradictions within the text. One of the most bizarre and analytically telling aspects of this demand was that while the funds were requested in digital currency like Bitcoin, the formal, rigid acronym USD, United States dollars, was explicitly attached to the phrasing. American criminals operating locally within domestic jurisdictions almost never use formal currency exchange codes in this casual or rigid manner. Instead, such specialized, clinical phrasing typically points toward dangerous operatives working outside the country, those deeply accustomed to international currency laundering and cross-border financial transactions, or someone desperately trying to sound more sophisticated, corporate, and calculated than their actual background suggests. The sinister threat that concluded the first note, "If the payment is not received, she will be harmed," was phrased entirely in the passive expression. In the high-stakes realm of forensic statement analysis, there is a vast, terrifying psychological gulf between a direct, active threat such as "she will be harmed" versus an ownership-driven declaration like "we will harm her." When a hardened criminal issues a genuinely active threat, they take direct, uncompromised psychological ownership of the aggressive act they are threatening to commit. Resorting to the passive voice strongly indicates that the writer is attempting to create emotional and cognitive distance from the brutality of the act itself, revealing a distinct lack of absolute commitment to carrying out the ultimate threat. Yet, this very hesitation deepens the mystery. Was the predator bluffing, or was the worst already committed in the shadows? Such linguistic markers are treated by behavioral profilers as critical, flashing indicators of hesitation, staging, or deliberate deception. A critical dimension of the first communication that demands intense scrutiny is the manipulative, labyrinthine geographical phrasing embedded within the drop-off instructions. The note explicitly promised that once the cryptocurrency deposit was cleared, Nancy would be released within 12 hours of deposit to a safe drop-off location back in Tucson. From a tactical standpoint, incorporating a specific time frame like a 12-hour window is a classic maneuver of obfuscation designed to buy precious time. By telling the terrified family that the victim is held half a day's travel away, the perpetrator attempts to construct a false barrier of distance, forcing law enforcement to look outward, expand perimeter grids into the vast desert, and waste valuable operational hours searching remote trails or out-of-state hideouts. However, elite behavioral analysts specializing in sudden-onset kidnappings note with absolute certainty that inexperienced or solo offenders rarely possess the logistical infrastructure required to maintain a secure, long-term multi-day captivity site far away from their home base. Transporting an elderly woman across state lines or even deep into desolate wilderness requires heavy vehicular support, secure safe houses, and constant surveillance, resources that a solo, disorganized offender simply does not command. Therefore, mentioning Tucson explicitly while framing the drop-off as a distant retained trip suggests the exact opposite, spine-chilling reality. The perpetrator was likely operating in terrifyingly close proximity to the victim's residence, using the 12-hour clause purely as a psychological smokescreen to mask their immediate local footprint while watching the police search the wrong side of the state. Beyond the lexical structure of the ransom notes, forensic investigators had to brutally reconcile the written text with the harsh, violent physical realities observed at the Catalina Foothills property. The presence of targeted confrontation on the front porch, indicated by heavy physical trauma to the face and localized impact patterns, reveals a frantic, bloody struggle that completely contradicts the clean, calculated narrative a professional extortionist would try to maintain. When a victim loses stability close to the ground and suffers immediate facial trauma, it points toward a rapid, chaotic confrontation rather than a clinical military-style operation. If multiple conspirators had been present during the initial breach, standard tactical profiling suggests they would have physically restrained or subdued an 84-year-old woman without inflicting severe facial injuries that compromised her stability right on the open walkway. The immediate collapse of the victim onto the concrete points to a lone attacker who panicked, lost physical control of the situation, and resorted to disproportionate, desperate force to ensure compliance. This grim physical reality creates a profound disconnect with the composed, administrative tone attempted in the ransom notes, further exposing the notes as an artificial construct designed after the fact to alter the narrative of the crime and cover up a fatal loss of control. Another compelling analytical angle that underscores the artificial, theatrical nature of these communications lies in the heavy reliance on dramatic tropes rather than pragmatic negotiation language. Sentences structured as absolute ultimatums, such as "there will be no negotiation," "do not play games," "law enforcement will not be able to help you," carry an unmistakable theatrical cadence. They read less like a genuine business transaction driven by financial desperation and more like dialogue pulled directly from a suspense thriller or a dark television crime drama. In authentic historical kidnapping cases where monetary reward is the absolute priority, perpetrators maintain an open, flexible channel of communication, showing a desperate willingness to bargain or adapt to banking constraints. Conversely, when an offender constructs rigid, movie-esque ultimatums backed by zero room for dialogue, it betrays an inward-looking psychological focus. The author is playing a role, fulfilling a twisted script written inside their own head, where they cast themselves as the omnipotent mastermind controlling a high-stakes media spectacle. This theatrical staging aligns perfectly with the observation that the ultimate prize was never the Bitcoin wallet balance, but rather the cultural validation of watching the media, law enforcement, and the victim's famous family dance to a tune of their creation. The manner in which these full notes finally leaked into the public domain also introduces a vital, volatile layer to the investigative puzzle. For months, local television stations in Arizona and specialized reporting teams held fragments of the correspondence, exercising immense caution to protect the integrity of the ongoing federal probe. The decision by reporter Brianna Whitney, formerly of a local Arizona affiliate and later associated with national platforms, to publicly read and distribute the complete, verbatim text of both notes sparked intense debate within investigative circles. While transparency is a pillar of modern journalism, Unvetted public disclosures in active investigations carry severe operational risks. Releasing exact phrasing, specific internal contradictions, and unverified data points can inadvertently contaminate future witness testimonies, trigger copycat communications, or allow a sophisticated suspect to calibrate their digital footprint and alter their behavior to evade detection. For Savannah Guthrie and her family, the sudden public airing of raw, painful ultimatums forced them to relive the acute trauma of those initial weeks on a national stage, weaponizing the very words of the predator to fuel endless media speculation and feed a public hungry for tragedy. The true turning point in this harrowing and multi-layered saga, however, was the second note that surfaced just a few days later. This subsequent message completely appended, invalidated, and contradicted all prior demands and claims established in the first communication. Any mention of a financial ransom was entirely stripped away and abandoned. Instead, the text pivoted drastically into dark territory, reading, "We did not fully grasp the seriousness of her physical conditions. She passed away shortly after she was taken. We believe it was heart-related. She is laid to rest in nature now." Choosing such terminology is entirely uncharacteristic of an ordinary, uneducated street criminal. Heavy, archaic, and clinical words like passed away, alongside stilted, formal phrases like physical conditions and laid to rest in nature, sit miles apart from everyday colloquial speech or natural human grief. This serves as definitive, compelling proof that the author was either consulting a physical thesaurus, leaning heavily on automated digital tools, or consciously attempting to project an intellectual, posh, and detached persona to mask their true identity. When legendary retired investigator Jim Clementi meticulously reviewed both letters line by line, he flagged another glaring, fatal error that completely undermined the perpetrator's facade. Throughout the entirety of the text, plural pronouns like we and our were repeatedly deployed to manufacture the illusion of a dangerous, highly organized criminal syndicate or a multi-person cell. Yet, right near the conclusion of the first note, a critical, unconscious slip-up occurs: "You will not be able to contact me from here on out." This single, isolated use of the singular pronoun me shatters the entire fabricated illusion. In linguistic profiling, when a narrative is built entirely around collective plurality like we and suddenly drops a singular me, it provides undeniable proof that no gang exists, only a lone predator clumsily employing the royal we in a pathetic, subconscious attempt to inflate his own stature, intimidate the family, and project a power he did not possess. Whispers grew dangerously louder in elite intelligence circles that an operative with the cunning, meticulous methodology of Tommaso Cioni would never leave such a glaring linguistic flaw by accident unless the crushing psychological pressure had begun to fracture his carefully crafted mask. The single, fatal slip from we to me revealed a chilling vulnerability. The mastermind was cracking under the weight of his own deception, leaving behind a permanent linguistic scar. The psychological unraveling continued in the second note with terrifying clarity. The claim that Nancy suffered a fatal heart condition and was abruptly laid to rest in nature, immediately followed by the deeply unsettling, comforting sentiment, "Nothing you could have done could have changed the outcome. We are truly sorry," introduces a jarring, discordant tone of artificial remorse and unwarranted reassurance. This specific brand of pseudo-empathy is virtually never found in genuine, hardened extortionists who are purely motivated by financial gain. Instead, it is typically found in individuals who fall victim to sudden psychological guilt, cognitive dissonance, shock, or a subconscious need for emotional undoing after committing an irreversible act. It closely mirrors behavioral phenomena observed in notorious historical cases, such as ransom notes in high-profile investigations, where theatrical, highly dramatic, and movie-esque prose was heavily leveraged to mask a dark, highly personal, and sinister underlying motive. Ultimately, these chilling forensic pieces, structural contradictions, and undeniable linguistic indicators lead impartial investigators to one inescapable, haunting conclusion. Financial gain was never the true driving force behind the ransom notes in the Nancy Guthrie case. Had money been the primary, rational objective, the second note would not have abandoned the financial demands entirely. Instead, a genuine extortionist would have leveraged the tragic news of her passing to intensify bargaining, demand hush money, or squeeze the family for a final payout. Wiping away the ransom entirely and pivoting solely to capturing Savannah Guthrie's attention reveals the true underlying motive, a profound personal obsession, a twisted psychological fixation, and a desperate, dark desire to forge a direct, haunting, and permanent connection with the victim's famous daughter. As the months continue to pass without closure, investigating agencies, behavioral analysts, and digital forensic teams continue to relentlessly pursue these exact digital footprints and linguistic clues, determined to unmask this elusive, solitary predator, whether he answers to the shadows or to the chilling name Tommaso Cioni, and bring the full, unvarnished truth to light before he strikes again.